There is a moment every morning, right before you check your phone, when your mind is completely clean. No noise, no comparison, no dread. And what you choose to put into that clean space in the next 60 seconds will quietly decide the shape of your entire day. Most people never notice that moment exists. They let it get filled by accident, by whatever notification happens to light up first, by whatever headline happens to be loudest. And that, right there, is the whole story of why some people build a life they're proud of, and others just keep waking up tired in the same place, year after year, wondering where the time went. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you've been telling yourself you'll start when you feel more motivated, when the timing lines up better, when things settle down at work, when the kids are a little older, when the busy season finally passes. It never quite passes, does it? There's always another reasonable-sounding reason to wait one more month, and each one sounds perfectly logical on its own, right up until you add them all together and realize they've quietly cost you several years. Maybe you've been waiting for some big dramatic turning point before you finally get serious about your life. Some moment that announces itself with lightning and thunder so you'll know for sure that this is it. Perhaps right now you're blaming the economy, or your boss, or the family you were born into, or the years you feel like you wasted chasing the wrong things. Maybe you scroll past people who seem to have it all figured out, the early mornings, the clean houses, the steady careers, and you quietly wonder what's wrong with you that you can't seem to get it together the same way. Maybe you've started and stopped so many times that you've quietly begun to believe starting again isn't even worth the embarrassment. Maybe you've caught yourself lying awake doing the math on your own life, adding up the years since you said you'd change something, and not liking the total you keep landing on. Maybe you've noticed that the goals you talk about at family gatherings are the exact same goals you talked about last year, and the year before that, word for word. Like a script you keep reciting without ever performing. That's not a character flaw. That's just what happens to anyone who waits for the feeling of readiness instead of building the habit of showing up. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You've just been playing a losing game without realizing there was a better one available the entire time, sitting right next to you, free of charge, waiting for you to notice it. And the good news, the real good news, is that the game changes the moment you understand one simple truth. Positive thinking doesn't shout. It works quietly. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It shows up as a decision, made in private, on an ordinary Tuesday when nobody's watching, repeated until it becomes who you are. That's the whole secret hiding underneath every success story you've ever admired from a distance. Not talent, not luck, not some rare personality trait you either have or don't. A quiet decision, repeated, on days that felt completely unremarkable while they were happening. Nobody claps for you on those days. Nobody's supposed to. That's exactly why so few people are willing to keep doing it once the novelty wears off. Let's talk about the first thing you have to accept if you want your life to change. You cannot control the seasons. Winter is going to come whether you're ready for it or not. Summer will end, no matter how much you enjoyed it. There will be storms you didn't cause and didn't deserve, storms with your name on them that you never signed up for. A farmer who spends his winter complaining about the cold instead of preparing his tools and mending his fences is a farmer who will have nothing to plant when spring finally arrives, and he'll spend that spring blaming the winter for his empty field. You don't get to choose what season life is currently handing you. Some years feel like harvest. Some years feel like frost. But you get complete, total, uncontested control over what you do with yourself inside that season, regardless of which one it happens to be. That's the whole secret, right there, hiding in plain sight. Not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. Some people go through a hard winter and come out bitter, harder to love, quicker to complain. Other people go through the exact same winter, the same layoffs, the same losses, the same disappointments, and come out sharper, wiser, more prepared for what's next. The winter didn't do that to either of them. The person did that. Ask yourself honestly, what season are you in right now? And are you spending it preparing or are you spending it complaining? Think about the people you know who seem to weather hard times without falling apart, the ones who lose a job or a relationship or a chunk of their savings and somehow come out the other side steadier than before. It's rarely luck. It's almost always preparation nobody saw happening. Quiet decisions made in seasons that looked calm on the surface, but were actually being used to build something underneath. Here's your action step. Tonight before you sleep, write down one season you're currently in, whether it's a hard one or a good one, and write down one specific thing you can do tomorrow morning to prepare for what comes next, instead of just enduring what's happening now. That's it. Small, specific, doable. And here's the part worth sitting with for a moment. Seasons are honest in a way most of life isn't. A season never pretends to be permanent. Winter always knows it's temporary, which is exactly why the farmer keeps working through it instead of packing up and quitting the whole enterprise. The people who make it are rarely the ones who got an easier winter than everyone else. They're simply the ones who kept mending fences while everyone around them sat by the fire complaining about the frost. Now here's the second principle, and it's one people resist because it feels a little uncomfortable to hear out loud. You are, whether you like it or not, becoming an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not the 5 people you admire from a distance on a screen. Not the 5 people you follow but never actually talk to. The 5 people whose voices you actually hear every single day, at the dinner table, in the group chat, on the drive home. If those voices are constantly complaining, constantly settling, constantly telling you why things won't work and why nobody ever catches a break, you will absorb that frequency whether you mean to or not, the same way a cold room slowly cools down anyone who walks into it. And if those voices are disciplined, hopeful, hardworking, and honest with you, even when it stings, you'll absorb that too, without even trying. This isn't about cutting people out of your life like they're disposable, and it isn't about judging anyone. It's about being honest with yourself about influence. A single rotten apple in a barrel doesn't stay contained to itself. It spreads to everything around it. Discouragement works the exact same way. So does ambition, thankfully, if you position yourself near the right people on purpose instead of by accident. Here's your action step. Think of the 5 voices you hear most in a given week. Just 5. Ask yourself plainly, if I became exactly like each of these people, in habits, in outlook, in discipline, would I be proud of that outcome? If the honest answer is no for more than a couple of them, that's not a reason for guilt or shame. It's simply information. And ask yourself a second harder question while you're at it. Are you one of the 5 voices dragging someone else's average down right now without even realizing it? Influence runs in both directions, always. You're not only being shaped, you're shaping too. Every time you open your mouth around the people who trust you, use it. Start looking for at least one new voice this week, someone a little further down the road than you, who's living proof that the thing you want is actually possible for someone like you. You don't need to replace your whole circle overnight, and you don't need a dramatic falling out with anyone to make this work. Sometimes it's as quiet as simply calling a different person the next time you're discouraged, someone who tends to ask what you're going to do about it instead of agreeing with you about how unfair everything is. Small shift in who you dial. Big shift in who you become over the following year. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably already know which voice in your life needs to be dialed down and which one deserves more of your time. You've known for a while. This is simply the reminder to finally act on it. Here's the third principle, and it's the one that separates people who talk about change from people who actually experience it. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings are unreliable. They show up when they want to, usually when things are already easy, and they disappear right when you need them most. Usually right around 5 in the morning when the alarm goes off and the bed is warm and the whole world is quiet and dark. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline doesn't negotiate. Discipline just shows up anyway, cold mornings and all. Success isn't some dramatic overnight event that arrives with trumpets. Success is a handful of small, almost boring disciplines, practiced every single day until the results become impossible to ignore or explain away as luck. Failure works the exact same way in reverse, and this is the part people rarely stop to consider. It's a handful of small, almost invisible errors in judgment, repeated every single day, until one day you look up and you don't recognize the life you're living, and you can't even point to the exact moment it went wrong, because there wasn't one single moment. Neither success nor failure arrives all at once. Both of them are simply the compound interest of your daily choices, quietly accumulating whether you're paying attention or not. This is why waiting for motivation is such an expensive mistake, maybe the most expensive one there is. You're waiting for permission that was never required in the first place. Here's your action step. Pick one discipline, just one. Something small enough that you can't reasonably talk yourself out of it on a bad day. 10 minutes of reading, a short walk around the block, making your bed the moment you get up, drinking a glass of water before your first cup of coffee. Whatever it is, do it tomorrow, regardless of how you feel when you wake up, regardless of whether you slept well, regardless of whether the motivation shows up on schedule. Discipline is the quiet engine of everything you want. Feelings are just the weather passing overhead. You don't cancel a flight because of a few clouds, and you shouldn't cancel your progress because of a few tired mornings either. Notice something else about discipline while we're on the subject. It never asks for your enthusiasm, only your attendance. You don't have to love the 10 minutes of reading. You don't have to feel inspired by the short walk. You just have to show up for it, the exact same way you'd show up for a job you didn't particularly enjoy but still needed the paycheck from. Show up long enough, and the enthusiasm tends to arrive afterward anyway, as a reward for consistency rather than a requirement for starting it. Think about anyone you've ever admired for their work ethic. Chances are they didn't wake up thrilled every single morning either. They just decided, a long time ago, that showing up wasn't optional. And once that decision was made, the daily debate about whether they felt like it simply stopped happening. That's the real prize hiding inside discipline. Not just the results it eventually produces, but the mental energy you get back the moment you stop negotiating with yourself every morning. Let's move to the fourth principle, and this one uses the same picture Rohn came back to again and again, because nothing explains the shape of a life quite like a garden does. A garden doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care that you meant to pull the weeds eventually, that you had a good reason for putting it off, that you were simply too busy this week. Whatever you plant grows, and whatever you neglect also grows. Just in a direction you never intended and rarely notice until it's tall enough to see from across the yard. Weeds don't need an invitation. They don't wait for permission. They show up automatically the moment you stop paying attention, quietly, patiently, without any urgency at all. Your mind works the exact same way, and so does your life in general. If you don't intentionally plant good thoughts, disciplined habits, and honest self-reflection, something will still grow in that space regardless. It just won't be anything you actually wanted sitting there. This is the quiet danger of drifting. And it's dangerous precisely because it doesn't feel dangerous while it's happening. Nobody drifts into a great physique. Nobody drifts into a stable financial future or a paid-off house. Nobody drifts into a strong marriage or a meaningful career they're proud to describe at a dinner party. But people drift into debt constantly, almost without noticing. People drift into resentment constantly, one small unspoken grievance at a time. People drift into mediocrity so gradually that they don't even feel it happening. The same way you don't feel a season slowly turning until you're suddenly standing outside in the cold, wondering when exactly it got so late in the year. Here's your action step. Look at one part of your life you've been quietly neglecting, whether it's your health, your finances, your relationships, or your own mind. And plant one seed today, right now if you can. Read one page of something worthwhile. Set aside one single dollar towards something that matters. Say one honest, kind sentence to someone you love instead of the easy, sarcastic one. A small seed, planted on purpose, beats an entire field left to chance every single time. And notice this too, because it matters more than people give it credit for. The garden doesn't judge how small the seed is. It only asks whether you planted it at all. A single page read, "Tonight" counts exactly as much toward the harvest as a chapter, because the habit of showing up is the actual crop you're growing, not the size of any one day's effort. This is where a lot of people quietly talk themselves out of starting. They convince themselves that if they can't do it properly, big and thorough and impressive, there's no point doing it at all. That thinking has killed more gardens than laziness ever has. A tiny seed, planted consistently, will always outgrow a big, ambitious plan that never actually gets into the ground. Here's the fifth principle, and it might be the most freeing idea in this entire message, once it actually lands. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. Two people can lose the exact same job on the exact same day, walked out by the same company for the same reason. One person spends the next 6 months in bitterness, replaying the unfairness of it over and over at every dinner and every gathering, and ends up right back where he started, just older and angrier. The other person treats the loss as a strange kind of permission, uses the free time to learn a new skill nobody was paying him to learn, rebuilds slower but stronger, and a year later is genuinely grateful that door closed when it did. Same event on the same calendar date, completely different outcome, years apart. The event was never the deciding factor. The response was every single time. This is uncomfortable to hear because it quietly removes your excuses, but it's also the most liberating thing you'll ever accept, because it means the outcome of your life was never actually in the hands of your circumstances. It was in yours the whole time, even during the years it didn't feel that way. Rohn used to point out that the same wind blows on everybody, rich or poor, lucky or unlucky. Some sailors adjust their sails and end up exactly where they intended to go despite the wind. Others just complain about the wind and blame it for wherever they happen to land. The wind was never the variable that mattered. The sail was. Here's your action step. Think of one thing that happened to you that you didn't deserve and didn't ask for, something that still stings a little when you think about it. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" a question with no useful answer, ask, "What can I now do because of this?" a question that actually leads somewhere. That single shift in the question changes everything that follows it. It's worth saying plainly that this isn't about pretending the hard thing didn't hurt, or rushing past grief just to sound productive. It's about refusing to let the hard thing get the final word on who you become. The event gets to happen to you. It never gets to decide what you do next. That part stays yours, always. Think back on the hardest chapter of your own life so far, the one you'd never choose to repeat. Chances are, if you're honest, some of your real strength, the kind other people can actually see in you now, was forged inside that exact chapter and nowhere else. Not because the pain was good, it wasn't, but because of what you decided to do with it once it arrived uninvited. Now, the sixth principle, and this one quietly ties everything else together, because none of these disciplines mean very much without a direction to aim them at. A ship without a destination will never complain about the weather, because it genuinely doesn't matter where the wind takes it. It's already lost either way. But a ship with a destination treats that same exact wind completely differently, because now every gust either helps the mission or hurts it, and the captain has a reason to adjust the sails instead of just drifting wherever the current happens to push. Goals do the exact same thing for a human being. Without a clear target, effort just scatters in every direction at once. You can be busy every single day, exhausted by dinner time, and still be going nowhere in particular, because busy and effective have never been the same word, no matter how tired you feel at the end of the day. A goal doesn't have to be massive or dramatic to be powerful. It just has to be specific enough that you'd know the exact moment you hit it without anyone having to tell you. Vague hopes produce vague results, every time, without exception. Written, specific goals produce something you can actually measure your own discipline against, day by day. Here's your action step. Write down one specific goal for the next 90 days. Not a wish, not a someday, but a real goal with a number or a date attached to it, something you'll either clearly achieve or clearly miss. No gray area to hide in. Vague hopes don't move you forward an inch. A written target does, almost immediately, just by existing on paper where you can see it. There's something almost strange about how this works. The goal itself doesn't do the labor. You still have to do the labor. But the goal tells your daily discipline where to point itself. And a disciplined effort with no direction is like a strong current with no riverbed, powerful, but wasted, going nowhere in particular, no matter how much energy it carries. This is why two people can work equally hard, put in the exact same number of hours in a given year, and end up in completely different places 5 years later. One of them was rowing toward a specific shore. The other was just rowing, hoping the effort itself would eventually count for something. Effort always counts for something, but aimed effort counts for so much more. Now let me get honest with you for a second, because I think you've earned that after everything we just walked through together. I've said all of this like it's simple, and in a way, it truly is simple. But simple isn't the same thing as easy, and I want to be straight with you about that difference. There were seasons in my own life where I knew exactly what I should be doing and did the opposite anyway, out of tiredness, out of stubbornness, out of plain old fear. There were mornings I hit snooze on disciplines I claimed to care deeply about the night before. There were people in my own circle I should have distanced myself from years before I actually worked up the nerve to do it, because comfort felt easier than honesty, and honesty felt like it might cost me something I wasn't ready to lose. I'm not telling you any of this from some finished, perfected place, looking down at you from somewhere higher up. I'm telling you this as someone who has planted plenty of weeds by accident over the years and had to spend real, uncomfortable time pulling them back out one at a time with dirt under my fingernails the whole way. The difference between where I used to be and where I am now was never one giant dramatic leap, no single moment I can point to and say that's when everything changed. It was 100 small corrections, made quietly. On ordinary days, nobody else was watching or clapping for. That's the part nobody ever puts in the highlight reel. Nobody films the version where you simply made your bed and drank your water and read your one page and went to work like everyone else on an unremarkable Tuesday. But that boring, unfilmed, unglamorous version is the entire secret, start to finish. It was never going to look impressive while it was actually happening. It was only ever going to look impressive once you turned around and looked back at it from further down the road. I also want to say this clearly, because I think it gets skipped over too often in messages like this one. None of this means the difficult years were your fault, or that every hard season in your life was somehow deserved because you weren't disciplined enough. Some winters are simply longer and colder than others, and some people are handed harder ground to farm than the person standing next to them. That's real, and I won't pretend otherwise just to make a tidy point. But even on hard ground, something can still be planted. Even in a long winter, the fences can still get mended. The unfairness of the ground doesn't excuse you from farming it. It just means your harvest might take longer to come in than someone else's, and that's all right. Slow and real beats fast and fake every single time. I think about the people who write me and say they feel behind, like everyone else got a head start they never received. And I understand that feeling because I've had it myself more than once. But behind compared to what exactly? Behind whose timeline? There is no judge standing at the finish line comparing your mile marker to your neighbor's. There's only the question of whether you're further along than you were last season, whether the field looks a little more tended than it did a year ago. That's the only comparison that was ever fair, and it's the only one actually worth making. So here's where this leaves you, standing right where you are with the exact same life you've got right now, no better and no worse than it was an hour ago when you pressed play. Nothing outside of you has changed in the last 30 minutes. But something inside this conversation has, if you let it. You now know that positive thinking isn't a mood you wait around for like weather. It's a decision you make in the clean 60 seconds before the world gets loud, repeated daily until it becomes your default setting instead of something you have to force. You know the seasons will keep changing whether you're ready or not, and your only real job is to be the kind of person who prepares instead of complains, regardless of which season currently has your name on it. You know the 5 voices around you are shaping you right now, quietly, in real time, whether you invited them to or not. You know discipline was always going to outlast motivation. Every single time they went head-to-head across a long enough stretch of time. You know your mind is a garden that never stays empty for long, so it might as well be filled with something you planted on purpose instead of whatever blows in on the wind. You know the events of your life were never the real deciding factor. Your response always was from the very first hard thing that ever happened to you. And you know that a target, however small, quietly turns scattered effort into forward motion you can actually feel. None of this required a single new tool, a new app, a new course, or a single dollar spent on anything at all. It only required a decision, the same one available to you an hour ago before you pressed play, except now you actually understand what that decision is worth and what it costs you every single day you continue putting it off. Here's the one line I want you to actually carry with you when everything else from this video fades. Nobody drifts their way into a life they're proud of. Nobody accidentally becomes disciplined or accidentally becomes wise or accidentally becomes the kind of person other people quietly admire. So don't try to do anything huge tomorrow. Don't try to overhaul your entire existence in the next 24 hours because that kind of pressure is exactly what makes people quit by lunchtime and feel worse than when they started. Just do one thing. Pick the smallest true discipline from everything we just covered together. The one that made you a little uncomfortable when you first heard it. The one you quietly recognized yourself in. And do that one thing before you go to bed tomorrow night. That's the entire assignment. Nothing more complicated than that. One seed planted on purpose in the next 24 hours while the ground is still soft. Not because tomorrow guarantees anything, but because tomorrow is the only ground you actually get to work with. And putting it off one more day is exactly how all those wasted years got started in the first place. And before you go, I want you to do one more small thing for yourself. Down in the comments, I want you to write just one single word. Not a paragraph, not a long explanation, not a justification for anyone else's benefit. Just one word that represents the one discipline you're committing to starting tomorrow. Discipline, patience, focus, consistency. Whatever word happens to be true for you right now, write it down where you can see it later, because a commitment you say out loud, even quietly, even just in a comment section full of strangers, tends to stick a lot harder than one you only ever think about in private. The season is going to change either way, with you or without you, ready or not. The only real question left is whether you'll be ready for it this time. So plant the seed, write the word, and let's see who you become the next time we talk.